In the golden age of Israel, between myth and history, stands a figure whose shadow stretches across 3 millennia. Solomon, son of David, third king of the United Monarchy, whose name became synonymous with wisdom itself. But wisdom, as he would teach us, is a double-edged sword, cutting both ways. Imagine, if you will, Jerusalem in the 10th century BCE. The city of David now crowned with a temple of unprecedented grandeur, its stones hewn by hands both mortal and, if legends are to be believed, otherworldly. Here walked a man who began as a dreaming prince and ended as an enigma, a king who spoke 3,000 proverbs and whose songs numbered 1,005. "Give me wisdom and knowledge," he asked of God, when he might have requested long life, riches, or the death of his enemies. And God, pleased with this choice, granted him a mind that would become both his glory and his burden. For to increase in wisdom, Solomon would later write, is to increase in sorrow. A bitter truth that he would come to know intimately. Consider the paradox. A man blessed with divine wisdom who would eventually turn to explore the darkest corners of human knowledge. A king who built the house of God, yet reportedly trafficked with demons. A poet who could speak of plants, from the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that springs out of the wall, yet whose heart would be led astray by foreign gods. This is a story of extremes, of divine inspiration and human folly, of transcendent love and earthly desire, of wisdom gained and paradise lost. Through Solomon's eyes we will see the heights of humanity and the depths of mortality. Through his words, both those traditionally attributed and those ascribed by later traditions, we touch a soul haunted by the fundamental questions that also and still haunt us today. What is wisdom worth? What can be known? What endures? Today, we open the texts attributed to Solomon, from the sublime poetry of the Song of Songs to the mysterious incantations of the Keys of Solomon. Remember that we walk a path between worlds, like the king himself. We reached a junction point of wisdom and mystery, between the sacred and the arcane, between what can be known and what can only be wondered at. Let us begin where Solomon himself began, not with answers, but with questions. For as he would teach us, it is better to be a fool who asks than a wise man who remains silent. If you are new here, welcome to Irrevelato. I unveil the secrets you deserve to know. If you know who I am, you also know I love you, my dear friend. As always, links are in the description, and let's see what secrets we discover today. Let's bring back the Promethean fire, and light bring our way into the dark, divine, and magical paths of the one and only, Solomon. Carl Jung's treatment of Solomon in Mysterium Conjunctionis reveals the symbolic relationships that can be found in both alchemical transformation and psychological integration. Jung sees in him a crucial archetype representing the marriage of divine wisdom with human consciousness, the integration of opposing forces, and the transformation of the psyche through sacred union. Jung's analysis begins with the profound symbolism of Solomon's relationship with the Queen of Sheba. In examining Johannes Gracius's alchemical text, Jung notes how the queen appears as the white dove hidden in lead, a symbol pregnant with meaning. This image combines purity, the white dove, with the base matter of lead, suggesting transformation's potential hidden within the mundane. Gracius's statement that she was willing to give herself to none but King Solomon points to the necessity of proper matching and psychological transformation. Not any union will do. There must be a correspondence between the seeking consciousness and the wisdom it pursues. The text emphasizes this by calling her chaste, wise, and rich, qualities that mirror Solomon's own attributes. Penotus's commentary, which Jung carefully analyzes, adds another layer by introducing solar symbolism. The comparison between the heavenly sun and the earthly or mineral sun establishes a parallel between celestial and terrestrial wisdom. Solomon becomes the solar king, who must unite with the lunar queen, the Queen of Sheba, in her fairest garment of white. This symbolism speaks to the integration of conscious, solar, and unconscious lunar aspects of the psyche. Jung emphasizes that this union transcends mere allegory. In section 542, he states explicitly that the psychological union of opposites is an intuitive idea which covers the phenomenology of this process. The marriage must remain the mystery of the queen, precisely because it represents a transformation that cannot be reduced to rational explanation. The text from Honorius of Autumn that Jung cites connects Solomonic wisdom to Christian mysticism. The parallel between John drinking from the fount of wisdom at Jesus' breast and the Queen of Sheba seeking Solomon's wisdom suggests a continuity of symbolic understanding across traditions. This demonstrates how the archetype of sacred wisdom-seeking transcends specific religious contexts. Particularly significant is the description Jung cites from the Rosarium, where Solomon speaks of his daughter, who wears the royal crown of 7 glittering stars and is adorned for her husband. The inscription on her robe in Greek, Arabic, and Latin emphasizes the universal nature of this wisdom while maintaining its exclusivity, utterly unknown to the foolish. Jung's references to the Wisdom of Solomon text reveal how this tradition understood divine wisdom as something that manifests in silence and darkness. The quotation from Meister Eckhart about the eternal birth happening in the virtuous soul connects Solomonic wisdom to the process of psychological transformation that Jung saw as central to individuation. The reference to Solomon Trismosin's Splendor Solis demonstrates how alchemical texts use Solomon's name to authorize their teachings about transformation. Jung saw in these attributions not historical claims, but psychological truths about how wisdom manifests through symbolic understanding. Jung's examination of Kabbalistic sources reveals another layer of Solomonic symbolism. The connection of Solomon to Yesod, the 9th Sephira, in Kabbalistic thought, shows how this wisdom tradition understood the relationship between spiritual and physical reality. Jung notes how this symbolism transcends mere sexual interpretation, pointing instead to fundamental principles of psychic organization. Jung's treatment of Solomon ultimately reveals him as an archetypal figure representing the human quest for integration and wholeness. Through the various traditions Jung examines, alchemical, Christian, Kabbalistic, Solomon emerges as a symbol of consciousness, seeking its completion through union with divine wisdom. The complexity of Jung's analysis shows that Solomon represents not just wisdom itself, but the process of wisdom seeking. The recognition that true knowledge requires a marriage of opposing principles, a union of conscious and unconscious, a transformation that can be approached through symbols but never fully rationalized. This understanding of Solomon helps illuminate Jung's larger project of psychological transformation through engagement with symbolic traditions. In Solomon's story, particularly his relationship with the Queen of Sheba, Jung found a paradigmatic example of how consciousness must seek its complement in the unconscious and how wisdom emerges through the integration of opposing principles. Solomon writes in Proverbs, "Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding." Plato agrees with this priority in the Republic. "The city we have founded is indeed wise, having good judgment." The relationship between Solomon and Plato reveals profound parallels in how ancient wisdom traditions understood the connection between divine knowledge and human understanding. Though separated by centuries and cultures, their approaches to wisdom demonstrate remarkable similarities that would influence religious and philosophical thought for millennia. The concept of the philosopher king in Plato's Republic finds its historical predecessor in Solomon's reign. When Solomon requests wisdom from God instead of wealth or power, he embodies the exact qualities Plato would later theorize as essential for ideal leadership. Both traditions emphasize that true governance requires more than practical knowledge. It demands a deep understanding of divine principles and their application to human affairs. In 1 Kings, Solomon prays, "Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad." Plato articulates a similar ideal in the same Republic. "Until philosophers are kings, or the kings and princes of this world have the spirit and power of philosophy, Cities will never have rest from their evils. Solomon's approach to wisdom through divine gift and Plato's method of dialectical ascent represent complementary paths to understanding. Solomon's wisdom, granted directly by God, demonstrates the revelatory tradition, while Plato's philosophical method shows how reason can lead to divine truth. These apparently different approaches actually reveal similar insights about the nature of wisdom itself and its relationship to human consciousness. The architectural symbolism in both traditions carries special significance. Solomon's temple, with its precise measurements and sacred proportions, represents the physical manifestation of divine wisdom in material form. This parallels Plato's understanding of how mathematical harmony reveals eternal truths. Both saw in physical structure the possibility of embodying transcendent principles. The Song of Songs, attributed to Solomon, presents divine love through intensely physical metaphors, while Plato's Symposium shows how physical love can lead to understanding of divine beauty. Both traditions recognize that eros, properly directed, becomes a path to higher wisdom. The Song of Songs declares, "Love is strong as death. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it." While Plato in Symposium speaks of divine love, this is the way, the ascent to beauty, to mount from these particulars and see that other beauty, the beauty that exists in itself. The limitations of human knowledge play a crucial role in both systems of thought. Solomon observes in Ecclesiastes, "For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow." Plato expresses a similar sentiment in Phaedo. "So long as we have the body, and the soul is contaminated by such an evil, we shall never attain completely what we desire, that is, the truth." Plato and Solomon understand that true wisdom includes recognition of our own ignorance. Both traditions emphasize that wisdom brings not just knowledge, but a sometimes painful awareness of human limitations. Their understanding of the relationship between divine and human wisdom shaped subsequent philosophical and religious thought. Early Christian and Hellenistic Jewish thinkers, particularly Philo of Alexandria, would synthesize these approaches, seeing in their convergence a deeper truth about how human beings can approach divine understanding. Both traditions recognize wisdom's transformative power. Solomon's wisdom changed not just his understanding, but his entire being, just as Plato's philosopher is transformed through contemplation of the forms. The wise ruler serves society through just governance and teaching. The social dimension of wisdom appears clearly in both traditions. Solomon's wisdom manifests in his ability to judge cases justly and govern effectively, while Plato's philosopher king must return to the cave to guide others. Both see wisdom as necessarily flowing outward to benefit the broader community. Proverbs states, "To do justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice." Plato similarly prioritizes justice in the Republic thus. "The just soul and the just man will live well, and the unjust man will live ill." This pairing of Solomonic and Platonic wisdom creates a stereoscopic view of truth, allowing us to see how different cultural traditions approached similar fundamental questions. Their insights suggest enduring truths about the relationship between divine wisdom and human understanding that remain relevant to contemporary discussions of knowledge, leadership, and spiritual development. The convergence of these traditions would prove historically crucial, as later thinkers found in their complementary approaches a more complete understanding of wisdom's nature. Their shared recognition that wisdom involves both theoretical understanding and practical application, both divine inspiration and human reason, both individual transformation and social responsibility, continues to inform how we think about wisdom today. The dialogue between these traditions demonstrates how wisdom transcends cultural boundaries while maintaining its essential nature. Whether approached through revelation like Solomon or through philosophical inquiry like Plato, wisdom emerges as something that transforms both the individual and society, uniting divine truth with human understanding in ways that enhance both. The Testament of Solomon opens with extraordinary precision about a supernatural assault during temple construction. Now, when I was engaged in the work of the temple, among the workmen there was a lad who was chief of all the workmen, excelling all by his skill and dedication, but an evil demon harassed him. This demon would come at sunset, and would take half his wages and half his food. Moreover, he was wont to take hold of his right hand and suck his thumb. Thereby the young man grew thin, although he was the first of the workmen, and he groaned and sighed bitterly. This account establishes more than mere supernatural interference. Ancient Near Eastern texts show similar patterns. The Gudea cylinders record how during the building of the temple at Lagash, the worker's strength was sapped at evening time, his skill diminished by unseen forces. These parallel accounts reveal a consistent understanding that sacred architecture attracts opposing forces. When Solomon learns of the youth's affliction, his response reveals the text's deeper concerns with authority and power. The Testament records his words. When I heard these things, I went into the temple of God and prayed with all my soul day and night, that the demon might be delivered into my hands, and that I might gain authority over him. And it came to pass, as I prayed, that grace was given to me from the Lord Sabaoth by Michael, his archangel. The archangel Michael presents Solomon with the seal that becomes central to all subsequent events. Take this ring, and mark the demon Orneus. When he comes, cast this ring at his chest, saying, In the name of God, King Solomon calls thee hither, and at once he will come obedient to you, and by means of him you shall build the temple of God. This ring bears specific markings that later magical traditions would elaborate extensively. This ring will in fact define an entire tradition of magical literature. The Testament describes, And I saw the ring, having a seal of engraving upon it, a pentangle, wherein was graven the ineffable name whereby all spirits bow and yield. How fascinating that even in this deeply religious text, we find the seeds of what would become ceremonial magic, the idea that demons could be bound to serve divine purposes. When confronting Orneus, Solomon employs precise ritual language that the text preserves. In the name of God, King Solomon calls thee hither. And I saw the Spirit visibly shuddering and trembling in the form of a great flame of fire. He came, manifestly against his will, crying with a loud voice, Why have you summoned me, O King Solomon? Each subsequent demon appears according to this established pattern. The Testament records Beelzebul's arrival. And I commanded another demon to appear before me. And there came winds from all quarters with thunder and lightning, and out of the winds came forth Beelzebul, saying, I am the prince of demons, seated in the heavens, yet fearing him who sits upon the holy throne. Carl Jung analyzes such encounters in Mysterium Conjunctionis. The structured interrogation of demonic forces represents the ego's attempt to integrate shadow aspects of the psyche. Each demon represents a specific form of unconscious energy that must be recognized and transformed rather than simply banished. The Testament preserves detailed technical knowledge within its supernatural framework. When the demon of stone-cutting appears, it reveals specific architectural wisdom. I am skilled in cutting stone for the temple of God. I can split rocks, move great blocks, and set the cornerstone in its proper place. But I also cause men to slip in their masonry work if they do not make the proper offerings at moonrise. This integration of technical and supernatural knowledge finds echo in Francis Bacon's observation in The Advancement of Learning. The ancient wisdom saw no contradiction between practical craft and divine inspiration, for both were understood as aspects of a single truth. The Testament reads like a supernatural interrogation manual, each demon compelled to appear before Solomon's throne, each forced to reveal its nature, its powers, and, crucially, the angel that thwarts it. Asmodeus declares, My office is to plot against the newly wedded, to separate them from each other. I bring about divorces. I incite men to commit murders and to think thoughts of violence. But I am thwarted by the gall of a fish burned in perfume. Solomon interviews 36 demons. The text tells us they control the 36 decans of the zodiac, and each conversation reveals both supernatural law and practical knowledge. One demon knows the secrets of precious stones, another the properties of healing plants, a third the movements of celestial bodies. But there's profound psychological insight here too. The demons Solomon interrogates represent human fears, weaknesses, and diseases. Each confession is a recognition of human vulnerability, and each angelic counter is a prescription for hope. When the demon of depression speaks of crushing the spirit, it also reveals the divine name that brings joy. When the demon of discord describes sowing strife between close friends, it also admits the celestial harmony that restores peace. The text builds to a complex understanding of how opposing forces serve divine purpose. Solomon reflects, "And I marveled at the wisdom of God, who had given me understanding of all spirits of air, earth, and under the earth. Some of these spirits I employed in the work of the temple, making them cut marble and bring precious stones from distant lands. Others I bound for the safety of mankind, sealing them with my ring." This understanding finds parallel in the Zohar's teaching. Even the forces that appear to oppose holiness ultimately serve divine purpose, just as the demons aided in building the temple. The Testament concludes with profound warning about the relationship between power and wisdom. "Let all men who read of these things give glory to God alone, and not to me, Solomon, for I am only flesh and blood, though granted understanding for a time. But because I did not walk perfectly in this understanding, even this great wisdom became a snare to me." This reminds us of the eternal truth that power without wisdom destroys itself, which all geniuses recognized, from Plato to Nietzsche, in Beyond Good and Evil. Nietzsche writes, "The highest power requires the deepest wisdom, lest it turn against its possessor." The Testament thus emerges as a nexus of ancient wisdom traditions, preserving technical knowledge of sacred architecture, ritual practice, and psychological insight. Its sophisticated integration of practical and esoteric wisdom demonstrates an ancient understanding that sacred power manifests through multiple domains of human endeavor. Through preserved ritual formulas, architectural specifications, and accounts of supernatural encounters, the Testament reveals a worldview where technical skill, spiritual authority, and psychological transformation merge. It raises eternal questions about the relationship between human consciousness, divine authority, and the forces that appear to oppose, yet ultimately serve sacred purpose. The temple rises in the background of these supernatural interrogations, stone by stone, beam by beam. And isn't this the perfect metaphor? The house of God was built with physical materials, but also with knowledge wrested from the darkness itself. Why Solomon is brilliant is because he is not bothered about how to separate the good from the evil. He's a few moves in front of us. Solomon mastered the art of making evil serve divine purposes in ways we have forgotten. Let's not miss the irony the Testament presents. Solomon, who would eventually be led astray by foreign wives and their gods, is here portrayed as the master of supernatural forces. The very power that allows him to bind demons eventually contributes to his downfall. As the text concludes, we see the seeds of his future errors: pride, curiosity about forbidden knowledge, the elegant entanglement between using power and being used by it. The Testament ends with a warning that is often found among all of Solomon's writings. Power, even power granted by heaven, requires wisdom to wield properly. But wisdom, as we'll see when we move to Proverbs, is more than just knowledge. It's the understanding of how to use knowledge rightly, properly, safely. The Book of Proverbs is a timeless treasure trove of wisdom, offering invaluable insights and guidance for living life in accordance with divine principles. At its core, Proverbs, traditionally attributed to King Solomon, is a book about the pursuit of wisdom. It begins with a clear statement of purpose: to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. From the outset, Proverbs positions itself as a guide for those who seek to live wisely, righteously, and in harmony with God's will. Central to the book's teachings is the principle that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. But this fear is a deep reverence and respect for God as the source of all wisdom. Proverbs teaches that true wisdom is rooted in a right relationship with God, and that all human understanding must be built on this foundation. As the book later affirms, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. One of the most striking features of Proverbs is its extensive use of parallelism, a poetic device in which two lines play off each other, often by repeating, contrasting, or expanding on an idea. For example, a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is the grief of his mother. This literary technique serves several purposes. It makes the Proverbs memorable and impactful, etching them into the reader's mind. It also drives home the fundamental contrasts that run throughout the book. The contrast between wisdom and folly, righteousness and wickedness, diligence and laziness, humility and pride. Throughout the book, wisdom is personified as a woman calling out in the streets, inviting all to learn from her. Wisdom cries aloud in the street. In the market she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy streets she cries out. At the entrance of the city gates she speaks. This personification of wisdom serves to make the abstract concept more relatable and accessible. It suggests that wisdom is more than a boring intellectual pursuit. Wisdom is a way of life to be embraced and embodied. This idea reaches its climax in the famous passage about the virtuous woman in chapter 31, who embodies wisdom in her diligence, strength, and fear of the Lord. Proverbs covers a wide range of practical topics, offering guidance on everything from financial management to interpersonal relationships. It strongly advocates diligence and hard work, using the example of the ant to teach the value of proactive effort. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which, having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. It warns against the dangers of laziness and sloth, which lead to poverty. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. The book also offers extensive advice on financial matters. It cautions against the temptation of quick, dishonest gain. Treasures of wickedness profit nothing, but righteousness delivers from death. It warns of the dangers of debt. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. It encourages generosity towards the poor. He who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord, and he will pay back what he has given. In all of these teachings, Proverbs promotes a long-term, principled approach to wealth, one that values integrity, diligence, and compassion over short-term gain. Proverbs offers a wealth of wisdom in terms of interpersonal relationships too. It emphasizes the importance of honesty and integrity. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who deal truthfully are his delight. It advises choosing one's friends and companions carefully. The righteous should choose his friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. It warns against associating with those prone to anger and violence. Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man do not go, lest you learn his ways and set a snare for your soul. Proverbs also places a high value on self-control, particularly in speech. It advises speaking with wisdom and restraint. He who restrains his lips is wise. It warns that reckless words can lead to ruin. Whoever guards his mouth and tongue keeps his soul from troubles. It teaches that a gentle answer can diffuse anger. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. In a world where words are often used to wound and inflame, Proverbs calls us to a higher standard of speech, one that reflects wisdom, kindness, and self-control. While much of Proverbs focuses on practical wisdom for daily life, it also offers profound spiritual insights. It teaches that the pursuit of wisdom is ultimately a spiritual quest, one that leads to a deeper understanding of God and his ways. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk uprightly. It affirms that a life lived in wisdom and righteousness brings joy and fulfillment. Happy is the man who finds wisdom and the man who gains understanding, for her proceeds are better than the profits of silver, and her gain than fine gold. Yet Proverbs also acknowledges that the path of wisdom is not always easy. The book recognizes that life is full of challenges and that even the wise will face difficulties. The righteous man may fall 7 times and rise again, but the wicked shall fall by calamity. The difference, according to Proverbs, is in how the wise respond to these challenges, with faith, perseverance, and a continual pursuit of understanding. The book encourages us to trust in God's guidance and protection, even in the midst of trials. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. Ultimately, Proverbs presents a compelling invitation to the life of wisdom. It promises that those who earnestly seek wisdom will find life in all its fullness. Now therefore, listen to me, my children, for blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not disdain it. Blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the posts of my doors. For whoever finds me finds life, and obtains favor from the Lord. The ancient wisdom of Proverbs remains profoundly relevant today. In a world that often celebrates self-interest, instant gratification, and relativistic morality, this book calls us to a different path, a path of wisdom, integrity, and reverence for God. It invites us to see life beyond the series of apparently disconnected events as an opportunity to walk in the way of understanding, to grow in character, and to live in harmony with God's design. The wisdom of Proverbs is not meant only for ancient Israel, but for all people in all times. Its teachings transcend culture and era, speaking to the universal human need for guidance, purpose, and understanding. We are invited to reflect on our own lives, to examine our priorities and choices, and to align ourselves with the timeless principles of wisdom. Proverbs needs to be approached with open hearts and minds, ready to receive its instruction and to apply its wisdom to our own lives. Therefore, let us, like the wise man described in its pages, incline our ear to wisdom and apply our heart to understanding. Let us seek wisdom above all else, trusting that the path of the just is like the shining sun, that shines ever brighter unto the perfect day. In a world filled with noise and confusion, Proverbs offers a clear and steady voice, guiding us towards a life of wisdom, righteousness, and peace. May we have the courage and the humility to heed its call, and to walk in the way of understanding all the days of our life. For as Proverbs promises, blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. With these haunting words, the book of Ecclesiastes opens a window into the soul of a man who has seen it all, done it all, and found it all wanting. Traditionally attributed to King Solomon at the end of his life, Ecclesiastes is a book that challenges our assumptions, confronts our illusions, and calls us to consider the deepest questions of existence. If the Book of Proverbs is a celebration of wisdom, Ecclesiastes is a sober reflection on its limits. The preacher, as the book's narrator is called, has pursued wisdom and knowledge, only to find that in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. He has indulged in pleasure and wealth, only to conclude that all was vanity and grasping for the wind. Ecclesiastes is a book that touches the modern soul, for it speaks to the emptiness and disillusionment that so many feel in a world that promises much but delivers little. The preacher looks at the cycles of nature, the rising and setting of the sun, the blowing of the wind, the flowing of rivers into the sea, and sees in them a reflection of the futility of human endeavor. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Yet Ecclesiastes is not a book of despair, but of honest searching. The preacher refuses to settle for easy answers or shallow platitudes. He insists on facing reality in all its complexity and contradiction. He acknowledges that the world is full of injustice, that the righteous often suffer while the wicked prosper, that chance and happenstance often seem to rule over human affairs. At the same time, the preacher affirms that life, for all its absurdity and unpredictability, is still a gift to be savored and enjoyed. So I commended enjoyment, because a man has nothing better under the sun than to eat, drink, and be merry, for this will remain with him in his labor all the days of his life which God gives him under the sun. Here is a wisdom that recognizes the fleetingness of life and the importance of living fully in the present moment. Throughout the book, the preacher fights with the great paradoxes of existence. He acknowledges the reality of death and the limits of human knowledge. For who knows what is good for man in life, all the days of his vain life which he passes like a shadow? Who can tell a man what will happen after him under the sun? At the same time, he affirms the value of wisdom, even if it cannot answer all of life's questions. Wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. For wisdom is a defense as money is a defense. But the excellence of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. One of the most striking features of Ecclesiastes is its use of reflective questioning. The book is full of questions that probe the depths of human experience. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? Who knows the spirit of the sons of men, which goes upward, and the spirit of the animal which goes down to the earth? For who can eat, or who can have enjoyment more than I? These questions are not meant to be answered definitively, but they do spur us to deeper reflection on the meaning and purpose of our lives. Ecclesiastes also makes use of vivid imagery and poetic language to convey its insights. The preacher speaks of the crooked that cannot be made straight, of the sore travail that God has given to the sons of man to be exercised by it, of the one event that happens to the righteous and the wicked, the good and the clean and the unclean. These images are powerful evocations of the perplexity and pathos of the human condition. As the book draws to a close, the preacher offers a series of exhortations that serve as a summation of his hard-won wisdom. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Here is a call to mindfulness, to living with an awareness of our mortality and our ultimate accountability before God. The final chapter of Ecclesiastes is a poignant reflection on the inevitability of aging and death. The preacher describes the darkening of the sun and the moon, the trembling of the keepers of the house, the grinding of the teeth, the rising up at the sound of a bird, the fears that come with old age. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Yet even in the face of death, the preacher affirms the enduring value of a life well lived. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. In the end, Ecclesiastes is a book that invites us to confront the big questions of life head-on, without flinching or retreating into comforting illusions. It challenges us to find meaning and purpose in a world that often seems chaotic and absurd. It calls us to live fully and authentically in the present, while never losing sight of our ultimate destiny. Perhaps most importantly, Ecclesiastes reminds us of the limits of human wisdom and the ultimate sovereignty of God. For all our striving after knowledge and understanding, there will always be mysteries that elude us, questions that cannot be fully answered. In the face of this uncertainty, the preacher calls us to a posture of humility, reverence, and trust. The wisdom of Ecclesiastes remains as relevant as ever. Modern people are full of vanity and grasping after wind. But this ancient book offers a bracing dose of reality, tempered with hope and the invitation to a life of purpose and meaning. So listen to Ecclesiastes with open hearts and minds, ready to grapple with its hard truths and to savor its moments of beauty and insight. Let us, like the preacher, refuse to settle for easy answers or shallow satisfactions. Let us instead embrace the fullness of life in all its mystery and complexity, trusting in the God who has made everything beautiful in its time. For the message of Ecclesiastes is not one of despair, but of sober joy and gratitude for the gift of life. As the preacher reminds us, he has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end. May we, like the wise preacher of old, learn to live with our eyes wide open to both the beauty and the brokenness of the world, with hearts attuned to the eternal even as we embrace the present. And may we, in all our seeking and striving, never lose sight of the one who holds all things in his hands, and who alone can make straight the crooked paths of our lives. The Song of Songs, also known as the Song of Solomon, is a unique book in the biblical canon. While other books focus on law, history, prophecy, and wisdom, the Song of Songs is a collection of love poetry. It's a celebration of romantic, erotic love between a man and a woman, filled with vivid imagery, sensual metaphors, and passionate expressions of desire. On the surface, the book reads like a dialogue between two lovers, praising each other's beauty and yearning for intimacy. The man compares his beloved to a lily among thorns, with eyes like doves and lips like a scarlet ribbon. The woman calls her lover radiant and ruddy, with a mouth most sweet. Their poetic exchanges are mixed with dreamy reflections and invitations. Let my beloved come into his garden and eat its pleasant fruits. However, the Song of Songs is not only a literal love story. For centuries, religious interpreters have seen it as an allegory for the relationship between God and his people. In Jewish tradition, the lovers represent God and Israel. In Christian thought, Christ is the bridegroom and the church or the individual soul is the bride. As the 3rd century theologian Origen wrote, "I advise and counsel everyone who is not yet rid of the vexations of flesh and blood, and has not ceased to feel the passion of his bodily nature, to refrain completely from reading this little book." This spiritual reading adds layers of meaning to the text. The longing of the lovers becomes a mirror for the soul's yearning for divine union. Their joy in each other's presence reflects the bliss of being in God's love. As Bernard of Clairvaux, the 12th century abbot and major proponent of this interpretation, expressed in his sermons on the song, "The soul at prayer should have before it a mirror of the bridegroom, in order that it may behold his face." Yet one does not need to adhere to a particular religious view to appreciate the depth and beauty of the Song of Songs. Its poetry captures universal humanity, the thrill of falling in love, the ache of separation, the power of sexual attraction, the comfort of commitment. It affirms the goodness of physical pleasures in a way that is rare in ancient literature. "Eat, friends, drink, and be drunk with love," the woman exhorts. At the same time, the song acknowledges the challenges and insecurities of love. The woman compares love to being sick and feeling jealous. The man searches anxiously for his beloved and is beaten by the city watchman. Their relationship is tested by distance, dreams, and the opinions of others. This realism makes their story all the more relatable. Throughout the poem, love is depicted as a potent, even uncontrollable force. It is strong as death and fierce as the grave, with flames of fire. Rivers cannot quench love, nor floods drown it. This is an all-consuming passion that transforms the lovers more than any basic romance can ever do. In a world where arranged marriages were common, the Song of Songs boldly celebrates the freedom and intensity of mutual desire. Yet for all its sensuality, there is also a tenderness and playfulness to the lovers' bond. They frolic in gardens and vineyards, calling each other by pet names like "my dove" and "my king." They delight in small details of each other's appearance and savor memories of their trysts. The woman even teases her lover, "Catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards." This is a love that brings out the couple's full humanity, physical, emotional, and imaginative. Perhaps most strikingly, the Song of Songs gives equal voice to both lovers. In a patriarchal culture, it was unusual to feature a woman speaking so boldly of her own desires. The Shulamite woman initiates encounters, praises her own beauty, and revels in the sensations of lovemaking. "My beloved is mine and I am his," she declares. This mutuality elevates their relationship to a true partnership of equals. Some have noted that the song does not explicitly mention God or spiritual matters. Yet in the context of the biblical canon, its very inclusion is a theological statement. It affirms that human love and sexual pleasure are part of God's good creation, to be celebrated rather than shunned. It reminds us that we are embodied beings whose physical experiences can be sacred as well as sensual. As the biblical scholar Tremper Longman III writes, "The song is a convincing testament to the beauty of human love and sexuality when linked to commitment." In a modern world that often reduces sexuality to a casual commodity, the Song of Songs offers a refreshing vision of love as a profound, exclusive bond that is both physically passionate and emotionally vulnerable. It invites us to approach our closest relationships with wonder, reverence, and delight. It encourages us to be fully present to the beloved in each moment, whether joyful or challenging. At the same time, the song's allegorical dimensions point to a love that goes beyond human connection. It becomes a template for the soul's intimacy with the divine, the ecstatic merging of the finite with the infinite. As the Sufi mystic Rumi wrote, "The minute I heard my first love story, I started looking for you, not knowing how blind that was. Lovers don't finally meet somewhere, they're in each other all along." Ultimately, the Song of Songs is a celebration of love in all its dimensions, physical, emotional, and spiritual. It affirms the goodness of embodied pleasure while pointing to a transcendent union that satisfies our deepest longings. It invites us into a posture of openness, receptivity, and wholehearted devotion, both to the human beloved and to the divine source of all love. In a culture that often sentimentalizes or cynically dismisses romance, the Song of Songs reminds us to take love seriously as a transformative force. It calls us to approach our relationships with attentiveness, creativity, and a willingness to be vulnerable. It reminds us that in the giving and receiving of love, we touch something sacred and eternal. So whether we read the Song of Songs as a literal human romance, a spiritual allegory, or both, it has much to teach us about the nature and power of love. It invites us to embrace our full humanity, to celebrate the beauty and goodness of physical intimacy, and to open ourselves to the divine love that infuses all creation. In the words of the song itself, "Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death." Let us turn our attention now to a less familiar part of the biblical canon, the Psalms of Solomon. These ancient texts, not to be confused with the canonical Psalms attributed to King David, offer an intriguing window into the religious and political landscape of Second Temple Judaism. The Psalms of Solomon are a collection of 18 psalms, likely composed in the 1st century BCE, that were preserved in Greek manuscripts of the Christian Old Testament. They are part of the Pseudepigrapha, a group of texts that were not included in the official canon of the Bible, but were nonetheless influential in early Jewish and Christian thought. The authorship of these psalms is uncertain, but their attribution to Solomon is likely a later addition. The texts themselves do not claim Solomonic authorship, and their content reflects concerns and styles that are distinct from the wisdom literature traditionally associated with the famous king. Instead, these psalms seem to emerge from a tumultuous period in Jewish history, likely in the aftermath of the Roman conquest of Jerusalem in 63 BCE. They reflect the political and religious tensions of a people, fought with foreign occupation, internal corruption, and the longing for divine intervention. One of the central themes of the Psalms of Solomon is the righteousness of God in the face of human injustice. The psalmists cry out against the sinners who have defiled Jerusalem and oppressed the righteous. They see the Romans as instruments of God's judgment against a wayward nation, but they also anticipate God's ultimate vindication of his faithful ones. Psalm 2, for example, paints a vivid picture of the lawless one, who, laid waste our land so that no one inhabited it. This figure, likely a reference to the Roman general Pompey, is seen as a temporary scourge permitted by God to chastise his people. Yet the psalmist remains confident that God will pronounce judgment on the nations of the earth and restore the fortunes of the righteous. This theme of divine justice is combined with a strong messianic hope. The Psalms of Solomon look forward to a future Davidic king who will purge Jerusalem of its oppressors and establish a reign of peace and holiness. Psalm 17, the most explicitly messianic of the collection, envisions this figure as a righteous king who will shatter unrighteous rulers and gather a holy people. Interestingly, this messianic king is not portrayed as a militaristic conqueror, but rather as one who will rule with wisdom and justice. He will purge Jerusalem and make it holy as it was even from the beginning, not through force of arms, but through the word of his mouth. This reflects a spiritual vision of messianic deliverance that would influence later Jewish and Christian thought. Another key theme in the Psalms of Solomon is the importance of individual and communal repentance. The psalmists acknowledge that the sufferings of Israel are a result of their own sins and unfaithfulness. They call on their fellow Jews to turn back to God with sincere hearts and righteous actions. Psalm 9, for instance, declares that God will remember his servants in mercy, but also warns that the way of sinners shall perish on the day of God's judgment. The path to restoration lies in humbling oneself before God, acknowledging one's transgressions, and recommitting to the way of righteousness. This emphasis on repentance and personal holiness reflects the influence of Pharisaic Judaism, with its focus on strict observance of the Torah and the oral law. Some scholars have suggested that the Psalms of Solomon may have originated in Pharisaic circles, allowing us to look into the piety and hopes of this influential Jewish sect. At the same time, the Psalms of Solomon also reflect a universalist vision that looks beyond the borders of Israel. Psalm 17 anticipates a time when the nations shall come from the ends of the earth to see his glory, and all the nations shall be in fear before him. This suggests a belief in the ultimate conversion of the Gentiles and the establishment of a worldwide reign of the God of Israel. In this way, the Psalms of Solomon connect the particularism of Jewish nationalism with the universalism of prophetic eschatology. They look forward to a future in which Israel's God will be acknowledged by all nations, and in which the righteousness of the Messiah will extend to the ends of the earth. For modern readers, the Psalms of Solomon baffle with the diversity and dynamism of Second Temple Judaism. They reflect the deep yearnings and bold hopes of a people struggling to make sense of their place in a changing world. They ask questions of theodicy, of the fate of the righteous in the face of apparent injustice that continue to inspire people of faith even today. Moreover, the messianic vision of the Psalms of Solomon provides an important context for understanding the emergence of early Christianity. Many of the themes and images found in these texts, the righteous king, the purification of Jerusalem, the ingathering of the nations, would find echoes in the teachings of Jesus and the beliefs of his early followers. Yet the Psalms of Solomon also offer a challenge to simplistic understandings of messianic fulfillment. They remind us that the hopes and expectations of Second Temple Judaism were diverse and multifaceted, not easily reduced to a single template. They invite us to appreciate the complex ways in which early Christian claims about Jesus engaged with and reinterpreted these earlier Jewish hopes. Perhaps most importantly, the Psalms of Solomon offer a model of faith that combines honest lament with unwavering hope. They give voice to the pain and perplexity of a suffering people, while also affirming the ultimate justice and mercy of God. They remind us that faith is about bringing our struggles before a God who hears and cares. Our world is filled with injustice and uncertainty, but the Psalms of Solomon invite us to hold fast to the hope of a God who will ultimately set things right. They call us to align ourselves with the way of righteousness, even when that way seems hard and lonely. They point us toward a future in which God's shalom will pervade the earth, and in which all nations will join in the joyful praise of Israel's God. To be sure, reading these ancient texts requires a measure of historical and cultural translation. We cannot simply transpose their specific political and religious concerns onto our own modern contexts. Yet their underlying themes of faith, hope, and the longing for deliverance continue to persist across the centuries. In the end, the Psalms of Solomon remind us that the story of God's people is one of persistent hope in the face of recurring challenges. They testify to the enduring human need for a justice that goes beyond our own abilities to establish, and for a peace that surpasses our own capacities to achieve. They point us toward a God who is sovereign over the rise and fall of empires, and who remains faithful to his promises, even in the darkest of times. May we find in these ancient songs a renewed invitation to place our trust in the God of righteousness and mercy. May we, like the psalmists of old, learn to bring our honest laments and our defiant hopes before the one who hears and holds all things. And may we, in our own way, become voices of faithful witness to the God who is making all things new. Amen. The curtain rises on a scene of deathbed politics. David, the warrior king, is dying, and palace intrigue swirls around the succession. Enter Solomon, not yet wise, not yet glorious, just a young man caught between his ambitious mother Bathsheba and his dying father. The chroniclers show us something fascinating here. Wisdom's first test isn't in judging between two women and a baby, but in sailing the treacherous waters of power transition. The books of Kings depict Solomon as a complex figure, wise and wealthy, yet also flawed and fallible. His story arc is one of great promise and tragic downfall. Solomon's reign begins with a display of his God-given wisdom when two women come to him claiming the same baby. He famously proposes cutting the child in two, knowing that the true mother would rather give up her son than see him harmed. "Bring me a sword, divide the living child in two," says Solomon. This is certainly cruel, but it's also a clever solution and clearly shows a profound understanding of human nature. Solomon understood that true motherhood would choose loss over destruction. In one stroke, he demonstrated both divine wisdom and its practical application. When all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had handed down, they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. But watch how the narrative builds. The chroniclers tell us, God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure, and breadth of mind like the sand on the seashore. They quantify it. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Numbers that suggest not just quantity, but completeness. Solomon's wisdom touched every aspect of life, from governance to natural history, from the cedar that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. Solomon's wisdom is further showcased in his grand building projects, especially the construction of the temple in Jerusalem. The construction of the temple forms the heart of Solomon's story in Kings. The Bible devotes several chapters to detailing its elaborate design and furnishings. The details are lavish. He lined the walls inside with boards of cedar, covered the floors of the house with planks of cypress. This temple would become the centerpiece of Israel's worship, a symbol of God's presence among his people. Its theology in stone and wood, not just architecture. However, cracks start to appear in Solomon's character. King Solomon loved many foreign women along with the daughter of Pharaoh: Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, "You shall not associate with them, nor shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods." Despite his wisdom, Solomon disobeys God's clear command. The consequences are severe. Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and did not follow the Lord fully, as David his father had done. God pronounces judgment, "Because you have done this, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you, and will give it to your servant." Yet even in this, God's mercy is evident. For the sake of David, the kingdom will not be torn away during Solomon's lifetime. And one tribe will remain with Solomon's son, for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. The portrait that emerges is of a king who starts well but finishes poorly. Solomon is granted extraordinary wisdom and enjoys God's favor, but he ultimately fails to follow God wholeheartedly. His foreign wives turn his heart after other gods, and he ends his life in disobedience and under God's judgment. Yet his legacy is not entirely negative. Solomon's wisdom, enshrined in the Books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon, continues to guide and inspire. And the temple he built, though eventually destroyed, foreshadows the true temple to come, Christ himself. As the New Testament affirms, something greater than Solomon is here. Jesus is the true wisdom of God, the one in whom all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are hidden. He is the ultimate king who perfectly follows God's will and establishes an eternal kingdom. Solomon's greatness contained the seeds of his fall. His wisdom made him curious about everything, including things better left unexplored. His wealth created obligations that twisted his priorities. His peace led to comfort that bred complacency. By the end, we see temples to foreign gods standing within sight of the temple he built for Yahweh. Thus, Solomon's story in Kings becomes a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the wisest among us can fall if we do not guard our hearts. It points to our need for a greater king, one who will never lead us astray. And it showcases God's enduring faithfulness, his commitment to his covenant promises even when his people fail. In the end, the account of Solomon in Kings is both history and theology. It reveals the character of God, his holiness and his grace, his judgment and his mercy. It calls us to a life of wholehearted devotion, and it points us to the King of Kings, in whom all God's promises find their ultimate fulfillment. The temple stood for centuries. The Proverbs endured. The example of his early reign became the standard against which all later kings were judged. While the books of Kings focus on Solomon's political achievements and moral failings, Chronicles presents a more idealized picture, emphasizing his role as the temple builder and his faithfulness to God. Yet even in this positive portrayal, there are hints of the problems that marked Solomon's reign. Chronicles devotes significant attention to Solomon's construction of the temple, seeing it as the fulfillment of God's promise to David. The detailed descriptions of the temple's design, furnishings, and dedication underscore the significance of the temple by recounting a powerful display of God's presence. When Solomon had finished praying, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. This divine endorsement validates Solomon's work and highlights the temple as the dwelling place of God among his people. Then Solomon said, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness, but I have built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell in forever." Solomon's prayer at the temple's dedication is a masterful expression of covenant theology, acknowledging God's faithfulness and pleading for his continued mercy. Solomon asks, "But will God indeed dwell with man on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built?" Its themes of repentance, forgiveness, and restoration would continue to exist in later Jewish and Christian prayers, such as the Psalms and the Lord's Prayer, testifying to the enduring significance of Solomon's words. Moreover, Chronicles highlights Solomon's wisdom and wealth as evidence of God's favor. When the Queen of Sheba visits, she is overwhelmed by Solomon's wisdom and prosperity, declaring, "Blessed be the Lord your God who delighted in you, setting you on his throne as king for the Lord your God, because your God loved Israel, establishing them forever. Therefore he made you king over them to do justice and righteousness." And she said to the king, "The report was true that I heard in my own land of your words and of your wisdom. But I did not believe the reports until I came and my own eyes had seen it. And behold, half the greatness of your wisdom was not told me. You surpassed the report that I heard." However, even in this glowing account, there are subtle indications of trouble. The description of Solomon's wealth and splendor hints at the excesses and burdens that would eventually contribute to the kingdom's division. And while Chronicles does not directly mention Solomon's foreign wives or idolatry, it does note that he failed to fully eliminate the high places of pagan worship. Perhaps most significantly, Chronicles omits the detailed account of Solomon's downfall found in Kings. There is no mention of his many wives turning his heart after other gods, no record of God's anger and judgment. Instead, the chronicler chooses to focus on Solomon's achievements and the blessings of his reign. This positive portrayal serves the chronicler's larger theological purpose. Writing after the Babylonian exile, the chronicler seeks to encourage the returned exiles by reminding them of God's faithfulness to the Davidic covenant. Solomon's reign is presented as a high point in Israel's history, a time when God's presence filled the temple and his blessings flowed freely. The chronicler's emphasis on the Levites and their role in worship further highlights the importance of the temple and its service. These also are the chief of the mighty men whom David had, who strengthened themselves with him in his kingdom, with all Israel, to make him king, according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel. By detailing the organization and duties of the Levites, the chronicler presents the temple as the heart of Israel's spiritual life, a theme that would be remembered by the post-exilic community. Yet the chronicler also knows that Solomon's glories faded, that the kingdom did divide, that the temple was destroyed. By choosing to focus on the positive aspects of Solomon's reign, he invites his readers to look beyond the failures of earthly kings to the promises of God that endure. The splendor of Solomon's temple points forward to a future restoration, a greater temple, a perfect king. This theme is echoed in the prophet Ezekiel's vision of a new temple, where the glory of the Lord returns to dwell among his people. It finds its ultimate fulfillment in the Book of Revelation, where the new Jerusalem descends from heaven and God himself dwells with his people. In this way, Chronicles' account of Solomon becomes a message of hope to a beleaguered people. Yes, earthly rulers may fail, earthly glories may fade, but God's covenant promises stand firm. The God who blessed Solomon with wisdom and wealth, who filled the temple with his glory, is the same God who will one day restore his people and establish his kingdom forever. For Christians, this message finds its ultimate fulfillment in Jesus Christ. He is the true Son of David, the one who builds the ultimate temple, a living temple composed of all believers. He is the embodiment of God's wisdom, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And he's the King of Kings, whose reign will have no end, as it is written in Luke. The New Testament further reinforces this connection between Solomon and Christ. Jesus' statement that Solomon in all his glory was not dressed like one of these lilies of the field implies that his own glory surpasses even that of Israel's most splendid king. Similarly, the description of Christ as greater than Solomon in Matthew affirms his superiority and the ultimate fulfillment of Solomon's wisdom in him. The writer of Hebrews captures this beautifully, declaring that the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. In Christ, the glory of Solomon's reign finds its ultimate expression, and the wisdom of Solomon finds its perfect embodiment. Thus, Chronicles' portrait of Solomon, for all its idealism, points beyond itself to a greater reality. It reminds us that earthly achievements, however glorious, are but shadows of the eternal glory to come. It calls us to look beyond human successes and failures to the unwavering faithfulness of God. And it invites us to place our hope not in earthly rulers or temples, but in the King whose throne is forever and the temple not made with hands. As we study Solomon's life in Chronicles, may we be encouraged by God's faithfulness, inspired by Solomon's achievements, and yet also reminded that our ultimate hope lies not in any earthly king, but in the King of Kings. For in him, all the promises of God find their ultimate yes and amen. And in him, we too can find the wisdom, the peace and the joy that Solomon's reign foreshadowed, but only Jesus can fully provide. We are reminded that his story, for all its grandeur and glory, is but a shadow of the greater story God is telling. The temple Solomon built, as magnificent as it was but a forerunner of the true tabernacle set up by the Lord, not by a mere human being. And Solomon himself, for all his wisdom and wealth, was but a type of the one to come, the wisdom of God, in whom all the fullness of the deity lives in bodily form. The Lesser Key of Solomon, Lemegeton Clavicula Salomonis, stands as one of the most influential and controversial grimoires in the Western esoteric tradition. Dating primarily from the 17th century, though drawing on materials far older, this remarkable compilation of ritual magic represents a complex synthesis of Jewish, Christian, and classical magical traditions. As Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa noted in his 1531 work De Incertitudine et Vanitate Omnium Scientiarum et Artium, three of the texts that would later be compiled into the Lemegeton, the Ars Almadel, Ars Notoria, and Ars Paulina, were already circulating as distinct works. Of this school, therefore, is the art Almadel, the notary art, the Pauline art, he writes, classifying them under the heading of Theurgia, that branch of magic which works through divine and angelic intermediaries. The manuscript tradition of the Lemegeton presents us with 5 distinct books. The Goetia, dealing with 72 infernal spirits, this section draws heavily from Johann Weier's Pseudo-Monarchia Daemonum, 1563. The term Goetia itself comes from Greek Goetia, referring to sorcery or magic with malevolent undertones. The Theurgia Goetia. Concerning spirits of mixed nature, this text shows remarkable parallels with Book 1 of Trithemius's Steganographia, written 1500, published 1608. The spirit seals and hierarchies match exactly in several cases. The Ars Paulina, purportedly revealed to the Apostle Paul after his ascension to the third heaven, this text aligns closely with Book 2 of Steganographia. As Thorndike notes in his Magic and Experimental Science, it was purported to have been discovered by the Apostle Paul after he had been snatched up to the third heaven and delivered by him at Corinth. The Ars Almadel, referenced by Trithemius in 1608 and found in Hebrew manuscripts of the Key of Solomon, including the Maftea Shelemo. Johann Weyer associates it with an Arab magician of the same name, the Ars Notoria, perhaps the oldest component, with Latin manuscripts dating to the 13th century or earlier. As Claire Fanger observes in Conjuring Spirits, it centers around an ancient collection of prayers interspersed with magical words, sharing notable similarities with the Liber Juratus. The British Library holds several key manuscripts of the Lemegeton. Of these, Sloane 3825 generally provides the most reliable readings, though all manuscripts show various degrees of corruption and interpolation. The magical practices detailed in these texts reflect a sophisticated understanding of Renaissance cosmology and angelic hierarchies. Let me be very clear. This is not superstition. This is a system of spiritual hierarchies reflecting both macrocosm and microcosm. The influence of the Lemegeton extends far beyond its medieval origins. From the Golden Dawn to Aleister Crowley's famous edition of the Goetia, these texts have profoundly shaped modern occult practice. Yet they also offer invaluable insights into medieval and early modern conceptions of spiritual reality, the boundaries between natural and supernatural, and humanity's relationship with both divine and infernal powers. What follows is an exploration of these remarkable texts, beginning with the infamous Goetia and its catalogue of spirits. In examining these works, we must maintain both scholarly rigor and an appreciation for their historical and cultural significance in the Western esoteric tradition. The Goetia, first and perhaps most infamous of the books of the Lesser Key, presents a systematic catalogue of 72 infernal spirits, along with detailed instructions for their evocation, as it was already mentioned. The text's meticulous attention to detail, from the precise construction of magical implements to the specific times and conditions for summoning, reveals an underlying framework of ceremonial precision. The spirits themselves are arranged in a strict hierarchy, with distinct ranks including kings, dukes, princes, marquises, and counts. Each spirit is described with remarkable specificity, their appearance, powers, and the number of legions under their command. For instance, Baal, the first spirit, appears in multiple forms, as a cat, a toad, a man, or all three simultaneously, and commands 66 legions. This hierarchical organization reflects medieval concepts of both celestial and infernal order. The text's ritual requirements are equally precise. The magician must construct specific tools: a brass vessel marked with Hebrew characters, a hexagonal seal to be worn on white vestments, a pentagonal figure made of gold or silver, Solomon's magical ring to protect from noxious fumes, the secret seal used to bind spirits. The geographical and temporal aspects are carefully regulated. The spirits are associated with specific cardinal directions and can only be summoned at certain hours. Kings may be called from 9 a.m. to noon and 3 p.m. to sunset, while marquises are restricted to afternoon and evening hours. The conjurations themselves follow a graduated approach, beginning with polite invitation and escalating to increasingly severe threats if the spirit proves recalcitrant. This reflects a sophisticated understanding of spiritual authority. The magician's power derives not from personal might, but from divine names and authority. Particularly noteworthy is the text's insistence on precise magical circle construction, which must be 9 feet across and inscribed with divine names from Ehia to Levana. This circle represents both protection and authority, a microcosmic representation of divine order. The Goethe's influence extends beyond medieval magic into modern esoteric practice, particularly through Aleister Crowley and S. L. MacGregor Mather's influential edition. Their interpretation, however, should be distinguished from the original manuscript traditions preserved in sources like Sloane MS 3825. Of special interest is the text's relationship with Johann Weyr's Pseudo-Monarchia Demonum. While the Goethe draws heavily from Weyr's catalogue, it adds significant ritual elaboration and 4 spirits not found in the earlier text. This suggests an evolution of magical practice, with later practitioners expanding and systematizing earlier materials. The Goetia thus represents not merely a catalogue of spirits, but a complete system of magical practice, integrating elements of Jewish mysticism, Christian angelology, and medieval cosmology into a coherent whole. Its influence continues to resonate through Western esoteric traditions, offering valuable insights into historical conceptions of spiritual authority and human divine-infernal relationships. The second book, the Theurgia Goetia, represents a brilliant counterpart to the Goetia proper. While its predecessor dealt exclusively with infernal spirits, this second book of the Lesser Key presents a more nuanced cosmology, dealing with spirits by nature good and evil. That is, beings of mixed character who inhabit the space between the divine and demonic realms. The chief spirits exemplify this complex hierarchy. Carnesiel, Emperor of the East, commands 1,000 great dukes and 100 lesser dukes, with notable servants including Mirezin, Zabriel, and Kumeriel. Caspiel, ruling the south, governs 200 great dukes and 400 lesser dukes, including servants like Shariel and Famol. In the west, Amenadiel leads 300 great dukes and 500 lesser dukes, while in the north, Demoriel commands 400 great dukes and 600 lesser dukes. Among the wandering princes, figures like Geradiel with his 18,150 servants, and Beriel with his 12 dukes demonstrate the text's meticulous attention to spiritual hierarchies and numbers. Each of these spirits governs specific domains and times, creating a magical landscape of spiritual authority and influence. The text presents 31 chief spirits, each commanding vast hierarchies of subordinate entities. Unlike the strictly infernal hierarchies of the Goetia, these spirits are organized primarily by their association with the cardinal directions and their mobility. 20 of these spirits maintain fixed locations aligned with compass points, while 11 are described as wandering spirits who move between locations. The ritual technology shows interesting variations from the Goetia. While many of the basic implements remain the same, the Theurgia Goetia introduces new elements like the Table of Practice for crystal scrying work. The timing requirements are also more complex, with specific spirits being associated not just with hours, but with particular segments of those hours. Particularly noteworthy is the text's relationship with Trithemius's Steganographia. The spirit hierarchies and seals show remarkable parallels, suggesting either a common source or direct influence. However, the Theurgia Goetia elaborates significantly on the ritual aspects merely hinted at in Trithemius's work. The spirit's powers focus less on knowledge and revelation, as in the Goetia, and more on practical matters, especially travel, finding hidden things, and operations involving the four elements. This practical focus suggests a different intended use, perhaps reflecting the needs of a different class of practitioners. The conjurations follow a similar pattern to those in the Goetia, but with subtle differences reflecting the spirit's mixed nature. There is less emphasis on threats and constraints, and more on proper diplomatic approach to beings who might be either helpful or harmful depending on how they are treated. Of particular interest is the text's treatment of the wandering spirits, who move between fixed locations and whose nature seems more mutable than their stationary counterparts. This concept of spiritual mobility adds an intriguing dimension to medieval magical cosmology. This sophisticated framework of aerial spirits, positioned between heaven and hell, reflects medieval and Renaissance concepts of a graduated cosmos, where sharp distinctions between good and evil give way to more nuanced spiritual hierarchies. The Theurgia Goetia thus offers valuable insights into how early modern magicians conceptualized and attempted to interact with these intermediate spiritual beings. The Ars Paulina, the third book of the Lesser Key, presents one of the most important systems of angelic magic in the Western esoteric tradition. Purportedly revealed to the Apostle Paul after his mystical ascension to the third heaven, the text is divided into two distinct parts, one dealing with the angels of the hours, and another concerning the angels of the zodiacal signs. The first section provides a comprehensive system of 24 angels governing the hours of day and night. Each angel commands multiple dukes and countless subordinate spirits. For example, the text details how Samuel, or Samael, ruling the first hour of day, commands 8 chief dukes with 444 servants each. The system is dynamic. The angels' powers change according to planetary hours and astrological conditions. The timing requirements are remarkably precise. The text specifies that its seals and operations were calculated for the 10th day of March, being one on a Wednesday in the year 1641, according to the old account. This exactitude reflects the text's deep integration with Renaissance astrological practice. The second part presents an elaborate system correlating angelic entities with each degree of the zodiac, essentially providing a guardian angel for every person based on their exact time of birth. These angels of men are organized into elemental hierarchies. Fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, are governed by Michael. Earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, are governed by Uriel. Air signs, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, are governed by Raphael. Water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, are governed by Gabriel. Each angel has specific domains of knowledge and power. Those of the fire signs excel in matters of personal protection, while air sign angels specialize in human relationships and knowledge. Earth angels govern material concerns, and water angels deal with emotional and psychic matters. The metallic compositions of the seals are precisely specified according to astrological timing. For instance, the seal of Aries must be crafted when the sun entereth the first degree of Aries, using specific proportions of metals, while the seal of Taurus requires a mixture prepared when the sun entereth Taurus. This sophisticated system reflects a worldview where the spiritual and material realms are intimately connected through astrological correspondences. The Ars Paulina thus represents not just a magical text, but a complete cosmological framework for understanding the relationship between human beings, celestial bodies, and angelic intelligences. The Ars Almadel, fourth book of the Lesser Key, presents a unique system of angelic magic organized around the concept of 4 altitudes, corresponding to the cardinal directions. Through this art, the text claims, Solomon obtained great wisdom from the chief angels that govern the 4 altitudes of the world. The ritual technology centers on the construction of the almadel itself, a waxen tablet, 4 square and 6 inches every way, inscribed with divine names and symbols. The text specifies exact details for its creation. Make the almadel of pure white wax and in every corner a hole, and write betwixt every hole with a new pen these words or names of God in the day and hour of Saul. The divine names must be inscribed in a precise pattern around the tablet. On the east portion are written Adonai, Helomi, Pine, while the south bears Helon, Heloi, Hel. The western face carries Jod, Hod, Agla, and the northern section displays Tetragrammaton, Shaddai, Jah. Each inscription must be made with careful attention to ritual timing and purity. The text establishes distinct color correspondences and angelic hierarchies for each altitude. The first Korah of the East requires lily-white wax and is governed by the angels Alimiel, Gabriel, Barachiel, Lebes, and Helison. The second Korah demands perfect red rose color and operates under the authority of Alphariza, Janon, Jeron, Armon, and Geraimon. For the third Korah, the wax must be green mixed with white-silver color, and its ruling angels are Eliphamasai, Gelomiros, Gedobanai, Saranana, and Elomnia. The fourth Korah requires wax of black mixed with a little green, and stands under the governance of Barchiel, Gediel, Gabiel, Deliel, and Captiel. The angelic manifestations vary according to their altitude. Those of the first Korah appear in the form of an angel carrying in his hand a fan or flag, having the picture of a white cross upon it. His body is wrapped round about with a fair cloud, and his face very fair and bright, and a crown of rose flowers upon his head. Each subsequent Korah has its own distinctive manifestations, carefully detailed in the text. The timing of operations follows precise astrological regulation. There are 12 princes, ruling besides those in the 4 altitudes, and they distribute their offices amongst themselves, everyone rolling 30 days every year. The magician must work when the appropriate angels hold governance according to the sun's position in the zodiac. This sophisticated system reflects a Renaissance understanding of the correspondence between celestial and terrestrial realms, with each altitude associated with specific powers and domains. The first Korah specializes in fertility and generation, making all things fruitful and increased, both animals and vegetables. The other altitudes govern goods and riches and can make any man rich or poor, demonstrating a practical focus on material concerns. The Almadel thus represents a complete cosmological framework for understanding and accessing angelic power through careful ritual and proper timing. Its influence can be seen in later magical traditions, particularly in systems that organize spiritual hierarchies according to directional correspondences. Through its careful attention to color, timing, and angelic hierarchy, the Ars Almadel provides a sophisticated system for engaging with celestial intelligences according to their proper natures and domains. Last but not least, the notary art reveals its most profound insights, not in its general framework, but in its intricate details. Consider the remarkable passage where Solomon recounts receiving the ineffable note. Solomon received this from the Lord in the night of pacification, engraven in a book of gold. This vivid image of divine transmission speaks to the text's understanding of knowledge as something simultaneously material and transcendent. The work's treatment of timing reveals a sophisticated understanding of cosmic harmony. For memory work, it prescribes specific lunar days, the 4th, 8th, 12th, and beyond, each with its own significance. These aren't arbitrary choices. They reflect the text's belief in the intimate connection between celestial cycles and human cognition. As it states, all the heavenly potestates and chorus of angels do rejoice in their lunations. Particularly fascinating is the text's warning about the dangers of casual approach to sacred knowledge. It tells the cautionary tale of a servant who, being too much overcome with wine in the company of a woman, presumptuously read it. The consequence was severe. He was struck dumb, blind, and lame until his death, watched over by 4 angels he had offended. This story serves not merely as a warning, but reveals the text's view of knowledge as something that demands total dedication and purity of intent. The text's approach to language itself is remarkable. It preserves orations in multiple tongues, suggesting that divine truth transcends any single human language. Yet it also acknowledges the limits of translation, noting that some words contain in themselves a greater sense of mystical profundity that cannot be rendered in Latin. This sophisticated understanding of language's both power and limitations sets it apart from simpler magical texts. The figure of memory described in the text deserves special attention, a complex diagram meant to be worn under the right ear while sleeping. This curious detail suggests an understanding of memory as something that operates even in sleep, an idea surprisingly resonant with modern neuroscience's findings about memory consolidation during sleep. Most striking, perhaps, is the text's insistence that true knowledge must manifest in visible transformation. As it states, "The angel of the Lord appeareth to thee. Keep and conceal the words and writings he revealeth to thee, and observe them to practice and operate in them." Knowledge isn't meant to remain theoretical, but must become embodied wisdom. The orations themselves contain passages of startling beauty. Consider this invocation. O wisdom of the Father incomprehensible, O most merciful Son, give unto me of thy ineffable mercy great knowledge and wisdom, as thou didst wonderfully bestow all science to King Solomon. The language moves beyond mere supplication to express a profound understanding of wisdom as both divine gift and human aspiration. This is a text that rewards deep reading rather than surface analysis. Each detail, from its precise timing requirements to its intricate angelology, from its mnemonic techniques to its moral prerequisites, reveals new layers of meaning when carefully considered. Rather than simply a manual of magical practice, it emerges as a sophisticated meditation on the nature of knowledge itself and humanity's capacity to receive it. The Lesser Key of Solomon stands as a testament to humanity's enduring quest to understand and interact with the unseen forces that shape our world. Through its 5 books, from the commanding hierarchies of the Goetia to the sublime wisdom teachings of the notary art, we witness an extraordinary attempt to systematize spiritual experience and divine knowledge. Each book is unique, offering a different but complementary perspective on the relationship between human and spiritual realms. And together they form a coherent whole that reflects medieval and Renaissance understanding of cosmic order. What makes the Lesser Key particularly fascinating is its implicit philosophy about the nature of reality itself. The text suggests a universe where the divine and material realms are not separate, but intimately connected through a constellation of correspondences, astrological, elemental, and spiritual. This worldview is perhaps most fully expressed in the Ars Paulina's integration of angelic hierarchies with zodiacal influences, and in the Ars Almadel's elegant system of directional correspondences. Yet it is in the notary art that the Lesser Key reaches its philosophical apex. Here, the emphasis shifts from commanding spirits to receiving divine wisdom, suggesting that true power lies not in mastery over other beings, but in the transformation of the self through knowledge. This final book, with its genius system of orations and its emphasis on moral preparation, reveals the ultimately initiatory nature of the entire grimoire tradition. The Lesser Key's enduring influence on Western esoteric tradition speaks to its success in articulating something fundamental about human spiritual aspirations. Whether viewed as a historical artifact, a practical manual, or a philosophical text, it continues to offer insight after insight into the perennial human desire to pierce the veil between seen and unseen worlds, to understand the forces that shape our lives, and to attain wisdom that transcends ordinary understanding. In this remarkable text, we find a collection of magical formulae and a comprehensive vision of reality that challenges our modern assumptions about the boundaries between natural and supernatural, between knowledge and wisdom, between human and divine. It stands as both a window into historical magical practice and a mirror reflecting our own continuing quest for understanding of the mysteries that surround us. The Greater Key of Solomon, a grimoire of immense power and influence, has possessed the minds of occultists, scholars, and seekers of hidden wisdom for centuries. Attributed to the legendary King Solomon, this esoteric text is a cornucopia of magical knowledge, offering profound insights into the realms of ritual, cosmology, and spiritual transformation. As the renowned occultist Eliphas Levi once wrote, "The Key of Solomon the King is the most famous, the most important, and the least known of all ancient books of theurgy." This mystical tome, divided into two distinct books, serves as a comprehensive guide for those who dare to walk the path of ceremonial magic. Book 1 lays the theoretical foundation, exploring the essential principles, preparations, and spiritual mindset required to undertake the sacred art of magic. It emphasizes the paramount importance of aligning oneself with the divine will and cultivating a profound relationship with the Creator. As the text itself declares, the beginning of our key is to fear God, to adore Him, to honor Him with contrition of heart, to invoke Him in all matters which we wish to undertake, and to operate with very great devotion. Book 2, on the other hand, is a practical manual, replete with detailed instructions for conducting magical operations, from the construction of ritual tools and the preparation of sacred space to the invocation and command of spiritual entities. It is a testament to the meticulous nature of the magical art, demanding unwavering dedication, precision, and purity of intention from the practitioner. Yet the Greater Key of Solomon is far more than a mere collection of arcane rituals and cryptic incantations. It is a philosophical and spiritual opus that invites us to contemplate the nature of reality and our place within it. As we read its pages, we discover a rich river of Jewish, Christian, and pagan traditions, intermixed to create a profound system of thought that challenges our preconceptions and expands our understanding of the unseen world. The Key of Solomon is a magic book, but more importantly, it is a direct link to the centuries-old stream of Western esoteric tradition. It is a reminder that magic, in its truest sense, is not about wielding power for personal gain, but about the elevation of the self and the attainment of wisdom. With such circumstances, let us see the enigmatic pages of the Greater Key of Solomon, revealing its secrets and exploring its profound teachings. Let us examine the preparations and purifications demanded of the magician, the construction of sacred implements, and the invocation of angelic and celestial powers. Moreover, let us eat from the underlying philosophical and spiritual principles that form the bedrock of this ancient text. We will also reflect upon the enduring relevance of the Greater Key in our modern world. In an age of rapid change and uncertainty, this timeless text invites us to reconnect with the perennial wisdom of the ages and to rediscover the transformative power that lies within each of us. So let us step into the realm of Solomon's magic, armed with curiosity, reverence, and an open heart. As the great magician Aleister Crowley once declared, "The Key of Solomon the King is the fountainhead and storehouse of Kabbalistic magic, and is one of the great books of the world." May our exploration of this seminal work not only enlighten our minds, but also awaken the divine spark that resides within our souls. Now, let us begin our journey into the heart of the Greater Key of Solomon, starting with a deep dive into the mysteries and revelations of Book 1. The opening of the Greater Key of Solomon. Book 1 immediately establishes the divine provenance of the knowledge contained within. As the text states, "Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, hath said that the beginning of our key is to fear God, to adore Him, to honor Him with contrition of heart, to invoke Him in all matters which we wish to undertake, and to operate with very great devotion. For thus God will lead us in the right way." This passage sets the tone for the entire work, emphasizing that the successful practice of magic is contingent upon the magician's spiritual disposition and relationship with the divine. It is not merely a matter of technique, but of aligning oneself with God's will through devotion, prayer, and contrition. Chapter 1 elaborates this spiritual foundation in more detail, outlining the necessity of divine love and the invocation of God's name. Consider this powerful invocation. O Lord God, Holy Father, Almighty and Merciful One, who has created all things, who knowest all things and can do all things, from whom nothing is hidden, to whom nothing is impossible, thou who knowest that we perform not these ceremonies to tempt thy power, but that we may penetrate into the knowledge of hidden things. This prayer encapsulates the core philosophy of the Greater Key, that magic is not a means of compelling God or subverting his power, but a method of aligning oneself with divine wisdom to understand the hidden workings of the universe. Chapter 2 introduces the complex system of astrological correspondences that underpins much of the ceremonial magic in the Greater Key. Each day and hour is associated with a specific planet, which in turn is linked to particular angels, colors, and metals. For instance, the text states, Saturday is ruled by the planet Saturn, and it is a day of sorrow and repentance. Its color is black, its metal is lead, and its angels are Cassiel, Makatan, and Uriel. These correspondences are not mere symbolic associations, but are understood as very real connections in the web of cosmic influences. The magician must navigate this system, choosing the appropriate times for each operation based on the specific planetary qualities desired. Chapters 3 and 4 outline the rigorous preparations required of the magician, including fasting, prayer, and ritual cleansing. The text is very specific about these requirements, down to the exact prayers to be recited. O Lord Adonai, who hast made both heaven and earth, and hast measured them in the hollow of thy hand, thou who art seated upon the cherubim and the seraphim, in the high places, whereunto human understanding cannot penetrate. Grant unto us that we may become responsive unto thy grace, so that through it we may have a full confidence in and knowledge of thee, and that the spirits may discover themselves here in our presence, and that those which are gentle and peaceable may come unto us. This passage highlights the extent to which the magician must purify and prepare themselves to be a vessel for divine grace and to command the respect of the spirits they wish to summon. The construction of the magical circle, detailed in these chapters, is of paramount importance. The text provides precise instructions, such as, Thou shalt commence the writing or construction of the pentacles in the hour aforesaid. Among other things, thou shalt chiefly use these colors, gold, cinnabar or vermilion red, and celestial or brilliant azure blue. The circle is a microcosm of the divine order, a sacred space within which the magician can safely operate. Each element of the circle, from the divine names to the geometric patterns, creates a harmonious balance of spiritual forces. Chapters 5 through 7 contain the specific conjurations and invocations used to summon and command spirits. These conjurations are not to be taken lightly, as the text warns, I conjure ye anew by the 2 tables of the law, by the 5 books of Moses, by the 7 burning lamps on the candlestick of gold, before the face of the throne of the majesty of God, that ye come immediately, and without any delay into our presence from every quarter and every climate of the world wherein ye may be, to execute our desire. The power of these conjurations lies in the invocation of divine names and symbols. The spirits are compelled not by the magician's personal power, but by the authority of God, which the magician channels through their purity and devotion. The latter chapters of Book 1 detail specific magical operations for a wide variety of purposes, from finding stolen goods to gaining love and favor. Each operation is a complex ritual involving precise timing, materials, and invocations. For example, to gain love, the text prescribes, Thou shalt commence the writing or construction of the pentacles in the hour aforesaid. Among other things, thou shalt chiefly use these colors, gold, cinnabar or vermilion red, and celestial or brilliant azure blue. Furthermore, thou shalt make these medals or pentacles with exorcised pen and colors, and ink, blood, or colors, prepared according to the manner which we shall hereafter show in the chapters on these subjects. These detailed instructions underscore the meticulous nature of ceremonial magic. Each element, no matter how small, is imbued with significance and must be prepared and used according to specific guidelines. The final chapter on the pentacles emphasizes their role as powerful talismanic objects. The medals or pentacles, which we make for the purpose of striking terror into the spirits and reducing them to obedience, have besides this wonderful and excellent virtue. If thou invokest the spirits by virtue of these pentacles, they will obey thee without repugnance, and having considered them, they will be struck with astonishment, and will fear them. And thou shalt see them so surprised by fear and terror, that none of them will be sufficiently bold to wish to oppose thy will. This passage suggests that the pentacles, when properly constructed and consecrated, become imbued with a divine authority that even the spirits cannot resist. They are not mere symbolic representations, but active magical tools that can bend spiritual forces to the magician's will. Throughout Book 1, several key themes emerge. First and foremost is the absolute necessity of aligning oneself with the divine will. Magic, in this context, is not a means of self-aggrandizement, but of humble service to God. As the text states, "Accursed be he who taketh the name of God in vain, but thou mayest without any other ceremonies make use of them, provided that, as I have already said, thou hast only the glory of eternal God for thine object." Secondly, the text emphasizes the importance of systematic, meticulous preparation. Every aspect of magical practice, from the timing to the materials to the mental state of the practitioner, must be carefully arranged according to complex cosmic principles. There is no room for error or improvisation. Thirdly, Book 1 presents a sophisticated synthesis of Jewish, Christian, and astrological elements. The invocations are replete with names and passages from Jewish and Christian scripture, while the astrological correspondences draw upon a long tradition of celestial magic. This syncretic approach reflects the diverse influences that shaped medieval and Renaissance magic. Finally, despite its spiritual and theoretical depth, Book 1 maintains a clear focus on practical application. The elaborate preparations and invocations are not ends in themselves, but means to very specific magical goals. The greater key is, above all, a practical manual for achieving tangible results through the manipulation of spiritual forces. In conclusion, Book 1 of the Greater Key of Solomon lays a comprehensive foundation for the practice of ceremonial magic. It outlines a worldview in which the magician, through devotion, discipline, and knowledge, can align themselves with divine forces and command spirits to do their bidding. Yet this power is not to be taken lightly. As the text warns, "Accursed be he who taketh the name of God in vain." The true magician is not a master but a servant, humbly working in harmony with cosmic principles for the glory of God. Book 2 of the Greater Key of Solomon is a comprehensive guide to the practical application of the magical arts outlined in Book 1. It provides detailed instructions for conducting magical operations, including the necessary preparations, timings, tools, and rituals. The book begins by emphasizing the importance of astrological timing in magical operations. The days and hours have already been treated of in general in the first book. It is now necessary to notice in particular at what hour accomplishment and perfection should be given to the arts, all things necessary having been previously prepared. Book 2 thus provides detailed guidelines for selecting the appropriate days and hours for various types of rituals, based on the positions of the planets and the phases of the moon. For example, operations related to love and favor are to be conducted on Fridays during the planetary hour of Venus, while those related to destruction and discord are to be performed on Saturdays during the hour of Saturn. The text then moves on to the necessary preparations for the magician and his disciples. These include ritual baths, fasting, prayer, and the donning of special garments. The magician is instructed to recite specific prayers and invocations during these preparations, which are designed to purify the body and mind and attune them to the divine forces that will be called upon during the ritual. The master of the art should be such as is ordained in the chapter concerning the exorcist and his companions, and if in this experiment it should be necessary to write down characters or names, thou shalt do that which it is necessary to observe regarding the pen, ink, and paper, as is duly prescribed in the chapters concerning them. One of the most important preparations is the construction of the magical circle. The which being done, Let the exorcist or master of the art, with his disciples, enter into the circle and call the spirits by their proper names and titles, which be written in the circle, and compel them to appear visible unto him and his disciples, in fair and human form, without any deformity or tortuosity. The text provides precise instructions for the layout and design of the circle, including the placement of divine names, angelic sigils, and other symbols. The circle serves as a protected space in which the magician can safely conduct his operations, shielded from any negative influences or entities. The tools of the magician are also described in detail. These include the ritual knife, sword, wand, and parchment, each of which must be crafted and consecrated according to specific guidelines. For example, the ritual knife must be made of pure steel and inscribed with divine names, while the parchment must be made from the skin of a young goat or lamb and prepared with holy water and incense. The knife with the white hilt should be made in the day and hour of Mercury, when Mars is in the sign of the ram or of the scorpion. It should be dipped in the blood of a gosling and in the juice of the pimpernel, the moon being at her full or increasing in light. Once the preparations are complete, the text provides step-by-step instructions for conducting various magical operations. These include invoking and commanding spirits, creating talismans and sigils, and performing rituals for specific purposes, such as finding stolen goods, gaining love and favor, and achieving invisibility. Here be the symbols of secret things, the standards, the ensigns and the banners of God the Conqueror, and the arms of the Almighty One, to compel the aerial potencies. I command ye absolutely by their power and virtue, that ye come near unto us, into our presence, from whatsoever part of the world ye may be in, and that ye delay not to obey us in all things wherein we shall command ye by the virtue of God the Mighty One. Throughout these operations, the importance of following the instructions precisely is repeatedly emphasized. The magician is warned that any deviation from the prescribed rituals can lead to failure or even danger. The spirits and forces invoked are powerful and can be harmful if not handled correctly. The book also includes numerous prayers, invocations, and conjurations to be used during the rituals. These are in various languages, including Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, and are often accompanied by complex sigil and symbols. The magician is expected to memorize these and recite them with perfect accuracy and intonation. O God, the vast one, send unto me the inspiration of thy light. Make me to discover the secret thing which I ask of thee, whatsoever such or such a thing may be. Make me to search it out by the aid of thy holy ministers Raziel, Zaphniel, Matmoniel. Lo, thou hast desired truth in the young, and in the hidden thing shalt thou make me known wisdom. One of the most striking aspects of Book 2 is the level of detail and complexity involved in the magical operations. The text assumes a high level of knowledge and commitment on the part of the magician, who must be well versed in astrology, theology, and languages in order to carry out the ritual successfully. The preparation and execution of even a single operation can take days or weeks and requires a significant investment of time, energy, and resources. If thou lettest any of these things escape thee, or if thou despiseth this book, never shalt thou attain unto the desired end in any magical experiment or operation whatsoever. For in this book is comprised all science of magical art, and it should be strictly kept by thee. At the same time, the text emphasizes that magical power is ultimately a divine gift, and that the magician is merely a channel or instrument for the will of God. The numerous prayers and invocations are designed to align the magician with divine forces and to request their aid and protection. The magician is warned against using his powers for selfish or harmful ends and is encouraged to use them only in service of the divine will. Accursed be he who taketh the name of God in vain. Accursed be he who useth this knowledge for evil, for God will speedily visit him with destruction. But may the blessing of God, the giver of all good, descend upon him who useth this wisdom well and wisely, and may he arrive at the accomplishment of all his desires. In conclusion, Book 2 of the Greater Key of Solomon is a dense and complex text that provides a wealth of practical information for the aspiring magician. It requires a significant commitment of time and energy to master, but promises great rewards for those who are able to follow its instructions precisely and with purity of intention. At the same time, it serves as a reminder of the ultimate source of all magical power and the importance of aligning oneself with the divine will in all magical operations. In a world where the boundary between science and magic was far more porous than it is today, the Greater Key enforces the belief in the power of human will to effect change in the spiritual and material realms. Its elaborate system of correspondences, its complex rituals and invocations, and its unshakable faith in the ultimate authority of the divine continue to fascinate and influence practitioners of magic to this day. But perhaps the true significance of the Greater Key lies not in its specific techniques, but in its underlying philosophy. It presents a vision of the universe as a network of interconnected forces, a cosmos shot through with meaning and purpose, in which human consciousness has a central and active role to play. For the modern reader, the Greater Key serves as a reminder of the enduring human fascination with the unseen, the mysterious, the numinous. It invites us to question our biases and ignorance concerning the nature of reality and our place within it. And it asks us to consider the ways in which our own beliefs and practices, however secular or scientific they may seem, are still shaped by the ancient human desire to communicate with the divine, to understand the hidden workings of the world, and to wield power for the betterment of ourselves and others. In this sense, the study of the Greater Key is more than intellectual gymnastics. It's deeply personal and spiritual. It demands that we confront the fundamental questions: what is the nature of the divine? What is the role of human will in shaping reality? How can we live in alignment with cosmic principles? These are questions that have haunted humanity since the dawn of consciousness, and they continue to haunt us in our own time as well. As we face this rapidly changing world with its complex technology, politics, and culture, we might do well to remember the lessons of the Greater Key. For at its heart, this ancient text is a testament to the power of human will and imagination, to the unquenchable desire to understand and shape our world. It reminds us that, even in the face of vast and mysterious forces, we are not helpless observers, but active participants in the unfolding of reality. And it invites us, in our own way, to take up the mantle of the magician, to cultivate wisdom, to seek alignment with the divine, to work tirelessly in service of a higher purpose. For as the Greater Key teaches us, the true magic lies not in the manipulation of external forces, but in the transformation of the self. This, perhaps, is the greatest lesson of the Greater Key of Solomon, that the path to mastery begins with the mastery of one's own heart and mind, and that in the end, the most powerful invocation is not one that summons spirits from the depths, but one that awakens the divine spark within each of us. Let us carry this lesson with us. Let us approach the challenges of our own time with the same spirit of humility, discipline, and devotion that the ancient magicians brought to their craft. Let us remember that in a world of mystery and wonder, the greatest magic of all is the magic of a life well lived, a purpose faithfully served, a heart aligned with the heart of the cosmos. For in this, we are all magicians, all servants of the divine, all co-creators in the great work of existence. And the key to our power, the secret of our art, lies not in any external formula, but in the depths of our own being. May we, like Solomon, have the wisdom to unlock that secret. May we have the courage to wield that power for the good of all. And may we, in our own way, leave behind a legacy as enduring and transformative as the Greater Key itself. So mote it be. The geometric patterns found in the magic circles of the Greater Key of Solomon reveal a deep connection between medieval magical practice and the mathematical and astronomical knowledge of the time. They embody a sophisticated understanding of sacred geometry and its role in mediating between spiritual and physical realms. Let's start with the basic structure of these circles. In most verified manuscripts, such as the 18th century French manuscript Clavicula Salomonis, held in the British Library, the circles are actually composed of multiple concentric rings. Each ring serves a specific purpose and corresponds to a different level of creation. The outermost ring often contains the names of God, angels, or other divine powers. These names aren't just labels, they're seen as direct conduits of spiritual energy. By inscribing these names around the perimeter, the magician is essentially invoking a sacred perimeter, calling on higher powers to define and protect the magical space. Moving inward, we often find rings containing Christian prayers or biblical passages, usually in Latin. This reflects the medieval worldview that saw magic not as something separate from religion, but as a natural extension of it. By including these prayers, the magician is affirming their work as aligned with divine will. But it's in the innermost circles that we find the most mathematically interesting patterns. Many designs feature intricate geometric shapes, pentagrams, hexagrams, heptagrams, and even more complex forms that show how geometry can act as a sacred language. Consider the pentagram, for instance. This five-pointed star has a long history in magical symbolism, but it's also a shape with profound mathematical properties. When drawn precisely, the lines of a pentagram form what's known as the golden ratio, a proportion that appears frequently in nature and has been studied by mathematicians from Euclid onwards. By including this shape, the magician is essentially embedding a mathematical archetype into their working space. The hexagram, or six-pointed star, has similarly deep roots. It's the shape formed by overlapping two perfect triangles, and it has long been associated with the union of opposites, male and female, fire and water, heaven and earth. In the context of a magic circle, it represents the reconciliation of these opposites within the magician themselves. Even more complex are the heptagram and octagram, 7- and 8-pointed stars respectively. These shapes are associated with the classical planets and their corresponding archangels in medieval cosmology. By including them, the magician is aligning their work with the order of the heavens themselves. But it's not just the shapes themselves that matter, it's how they're constructed. Many of these designs require precise use of compass and straight edge, the basic tools of classical geometry. There's a ritual aspect to this. By carefully constructing these shapes, the magician is seen as participating in the same creative act as the divine geometer who shaped the universe. This connection between magic and mathematics goes deeper still. Many key manuscripts include detailed instructions for creating magic squares, grids of numbers arranged so that each row, column, and diagonal adds up to the same sum. These squares were seen as powerfully talismanic, embodying the principles of balance and order. But they also reflect a sophistication in mathematics. The 3x3 square, for instance, is associated with Saturn and involves the numbers 1 through 9 arranged in a specific pattern. The 4x4 square, associated with Jupiter, uses the numbers 1 through 16. The inclusion of these squares shows that medieval magicians were mystics but also mathematicians, exploring numerical relationships and finding meaning in them. This tradition stretches back to ancient times, with magic squares appearing in Chinese, Arabic, and Indian texts long before they emerged in European grimoires. Astronomy, too, plays a crucial role in these designs. Many circles include symbols for the classical planets, often arranged in a specific order or aligned with certain geometric points. This reflects the medieval understanding of the cosmos as a great celestial machine, with each planet embodying specific qualities and influences. By arranging them within the circle, the magician is mirroring the order of the heavens within their ritual space. Some designs go even further, incorporating actual astronomical data. One 17th century Italian manuscript, for instance, includes a circle with the precise zodiacal positions of the planets for a specific date and time. Here, the magician is literally aligning their work with the configuration of the heavens at a given moment, seeking to harness the specific energies at play. What all of this shows is that the magic circles of the Solomon tradition are complex diagrams that embody a wealth of mathematical, astronomical, and symbolic knowledge. Each line, each shape, each arrangement of numbers and letters is there for a reason, contributing to an overall vision of ritual space as a microcosm of divine order. For medieval magicians, creating these circles was magical work in itself, a meditative act of geometry that aligned the practitioner's mind and spirit with higher realities. The precision and complexity of these designs destroys any notion of medieval magic as vulgar superstition. Instead, we see a tradition that embraced the cutting edge of scientific understanding, that saw no contradiction between invoking angels and calculating planetary positions. In tracing out these circles, the magician was essentially tracing out their understanding of the universe itself, a universe of interlocking correspondences, of celestial influences and mathematical archetypes, of divine names and geometric perfection. To step inside such a circle was to enter into a space where every point was charged with meaning, where the very shape of sacredness had been meticulously constructed. Today, as we look back on these designs with the benefit of modern knowledge, it's easy to see them as quaint relics of a bygone worldview. But there's a power in them still. Not just the power that medieval magicians believed they could harness, but the power of a vision that saw the universe as a great work and web and ocean and constellation of meaning, and the human mind as capable of knowing that meaning through the language of number and form. In a sense, the legacy of these circles lives on every time we use mathematics to model reality, every time we look to the stars for guidance and inspiration, every time we seek to align ourselves with a higher order. They remind us that the quest for understanding, whether mystical or scientific, is perhaps the great magical operation, the great work, the endless human work of finding our place. The next time you see a fancy circle, look closer, at the geometry, at the symbolism, at the details of the design. You're looking at a window into a worldview at once deeply foreign and strangely familiar. A worldview that saw the universe as a text to be deciphered, and the human mind as the key to unlocking its secrets. In that sense, perhaps we're not so far from those medieval magicians as we might think. We too live in a world of hidden correspondences, of patterns waiting to be discovered, of truths that can only be known through the right arrangement of symbols and ideas. And in our own way, we too trace out magic circles every time we seek to understand, every time we dare to imagine a universe that is ordered, meaningful, and shot through with the light of the mind, with each remembrance, with each recursion, with each fractal. Maybe in the end that's the real magic of Solomon's Circle, not the conjuring of spirits or the harnessing of planetary powers, but the endless human quest to find pattern in chaos, to make meaning out of mystery, to trace the shape of the sacred in the lines of our own seeking. It's a magic we're all heir to, whether we realize it or not. The magic of the questioning mind, the questing spirit, the restless imagination that looks at the world and sees not just what is, but what could be. In that sense, perhaps we're all magicians in the Solomonic tradition, all seekers after hidden wisdom, all geometers of the spirit, tracing our circles in the great book of the world. And maybe, just maybe, if we look deep enough into those circles, we'll catch a glimpse of the pattern behind the pattern, the meaning behind the meaning, the great cosmic design in which we're all, in our own small way, endlessly and entangled. The practical applications described in the Keys of Solomon reflect a worldview where magic was seen not as a fictional fantasy, but as a very real technology for interacting with spiritual forces. Let's look at some specific examples from verified primary sources, focusing on the Key of Solomon, Clavicular Salomonis manuscripts. One of the most famous applications is the creation of magical talismans or pentacles. The key provides detailed instructions for their construction. For instance, in the 15th century Latin manuscript titled Clavicular Salomonis, MS Lansdowne 1203, held in the British Library, there's a section describing how to make a silver pentacle for commanding spirits and doing all one's will. Concerning the holy pentacles or metals, these pentacles are usually made of metals, the choicest whereof is gold, whereon hath been wrought with great attention and solemnity the holy pentacles, the which is to be done in the day and hour of Mercury, the moon increasing. The text goes on to specify that the metal should be exorcised and engraved with a consecrated needle, then suffumigated with specific incenses during precise astrological times. Here we see the practical application of several key principles from the Solomonic tradition, the importance of proper timing, based on astrological correspondences. The magician must work in harmony with celestial influences. The use of specific materials prepared in ritually prescribed ways. The physical objects become vessels for spiritual intentions. The centrality of sacred geometry and divine names. The pentacles are covered in complex geometric patterns and words of power. Another crucial application is the conjuration of spirits. The 17th century French manuscript titled La Clavicule de Salomon in the Bibliothèque de l'Arsenal gives a detailed method. When you make your circle, you must carry your censer, your perfumes and your spices and trace the circle in the manner taught previously. It is necessary to write the holy letters and pentacles as shown in their respective places. Now, when the spirits are obligated to appear, show them the pentacles covered by your hand and uncover them with discretion. Note the emphasis on precision and authority. The magician doesn't entreat the spirits. They command them through the power of the circle, the pentacles, and divine names. This reflects a view of magic as a sacred science, where the operator's skill and purity allow them to wield divine authority. The use of magic squares is another key application. The pseudo-Agrippa text of the 16th to 17th century, found in various manuscripts like Bodleian Library, Michael MS 276, contains an example of a Venus square used for love and favors. By this square, magicians can cause enmity or love between persons, inclining or obliging anyone to do good to each other, and should be made on a Friday, Venus ruling the first hour or the 8th. Again, we see the importance of timing and correspondences, Venus Friday, but also how magic was used for very practical interpersonal ends, to create love, sway opinions, gain favor. The magic square becomes a kind of spiritual circuit board, arranging numbers in a pattern that is believed to shape probabilities. Even the gathering of magical ingredients had a deeply practical side. The 1572 Italian manuscript titled Clavicola di Salomone, MS Sloane 3847, in the British Library specifies how to collect vervain. This herb must be gathered at the rising of the sun in the month of August. Make a fumigation to it of frankincense, mandrake roots and saffron. Then say over it, Herba, I conjure thee by the virtue of the highest Creator, that thou be helpful to me in everything I shall demand of thee, and that thou fail me not. Here the magician treats the herb not as a mere plant, but as a spiritual entity to be addressed and enlisted. The act of gathering becomes a sacred ritual, a negotiation between realms. In all these examples, what stands out is the extraordinary level of detail and the unshakable belief in magic's efficacy. For the authors and users of the Keys of Solomon, these were proven techniques for achieving tangible results through spiritual means. Of course, from our modern perspective, it's easy to dismiss these practices as misguided at best, dangerous at worst. But there's a power in this worldview that's worth contemplating. A vision of the universe as profoundly interconnected, where every act, every word, every intention ripples out to shape reality itself. In a sense, the practical magic of the Keys of Solomon challenges us to question our own magical thinking, the ways we believe our thoughts and actions can influence the world around us. Are we so different from those medieval magicians, tracing out our own invisible circles, invoking our own secret names, seeking to bend fate to our will? Perhaps the true lesson of the Keys is not in the specifics of their rituals, but in the audacity of their underlying claim, that human consciousness is a force to be reckoned with, that our minds are not passive observers of reality, but active actors in its creation. In that light, maybe the real magic is not in the pentagrams or the perfumes, but in the power of belief itself, the ability to shape our world by shaping our thoughts. And maybe, just maybe, if we approach that power with the same precision, the same reverence, the same unwavering belief as those old magicians, we might just discover that we too hold the keys to unlock the secrets of the universe. But of course, as with all powerful technologies, the question is not just what we can do, but what we should do. The Keys of Solomon may offer us a glimpse into the mechanics of magic, but they don't necessarily provide the wisdom to use those mechanics wisely. That's where the other lessons of Solomon's legend become so crucial. The importance of discernment, of humility, of aligning our will with divine purpose. Because power without wisdom, as Solomon himself learned, is a recipe for disaster. So perhaps the ultimate practical application of the keys of Solomon is not in the casting of spells or the conjuring of spirits, but in the cultivation of wisdom itself, the ongoing work of aligning our actions with our highest understanding, of using our power in service of something greater than ourselves. In that sense, maybe we're all magicians in training, learning how to navigate the subtle forces that shape our lives. And maybe the true grimoire is not one we find in ancient manuscripts, but one we write ourselves day by day, choice by choice, act by act. After all, isn't that what magic is really about? The art of conscious creation, the power to shape reality through the alchemy of the soul. And isn't that a power we all possess, whether we call it magic or not? So let us learn from the old masters, but let us also become the new masters, crafting our own keys of Solomon for the challenges and opportunities of our time. Let us trace our circles with wisdom and compassion. Let us invoke the names of our highest ideals. Let us summon the spirits of our better angels, because, as Victor Hugo writes in Les Miserables, Ecclesiastes calls you the all-powerful. The Maccabees call you the creator. The Epistle to the Ephesians calls you liberty. Baruch calls you immensity. The Psalms call you wisdom and truth. John calls you light. The Books of Kings call you Lord. Exodus calls you providence. Leviticus, sanctity. Esdras, justice. The creation calls you God. Man calls you Father. But Solomon calls you compassion, and that is the most beautiful of all your names. And let us remember always that the true magic is not in the having of power, but in the wise and generous use of power, for the good of all, and for the glory of the One who is the source of all power and wisdom. As above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. These are the true keys of Solomon. May we use them wisely. Let us conclude this exploration of Solomon's wisdom and magic with a reflection on our own times, as we stand at the threshold of 2025, looking back on the events that have shaped our world in the preceding year. In many ways, our age could not be more different from the ancient and medieval worlds we've been discussing. Our technologies, our sciences, our social and political structures have evolved beyond recognition. And yet, at a fundamental level, are we not still wrestling with the same essential questions that haunted Solomon and his successors? Questions of power and its proper use, of knowledge and its limits, of the forces, seen and unseen, that shape our lives and our world. In an age of artificial intelligence and quantum computing, of global pandemics and climate change, of shifting geopolitical alliances and cultural problems, these ancient quandaries take on new and pressing forms. Consider, for instance, the rapid development of AI in recent years. Like Solomon's magic, it promises us unprecedented power, the ability to solve complex problems, to automate tedious tasks, to augment our cognitive abilities in ways that would have seemed magical even a decade ago. But as with all power, it comes with risks and responsibilities. How do we ensure that these technologies are developed and used ethically, in service of the greater good? How do we manage the economic and social disruptions they may cause? How do we maintain our human agency and wisdom in a world increasingly shaped by algorithms? Or take the ongoing struggle against COVID-19. Like the demons of Solomon's world, the virus is an invisible foe that threatens our health, our economies, our very way of life. And like those ancient magicians, we've had to marshal all our resources, scientific, technological, social, spiritual, to combat it. We've seen remarkable feats of rapid vaccine development and distribution, of public health mobilization and mutual aid, but we've also seen the limits of our knowledge, the fragility of our institutions, the deep inequities that the pandemic has exposed and exacerbated. In the face of such challenges, we might well ask, what would Solomon do? Not the Solomon of legend, with his magic rings and demon servants, but the Solomon of wisdom, the one who understood the power of humility, the importance of seeking knowledge, the necessity of acting with both courage and caution. Perhaps he would advise us to start by acknowledging our own limitations, the gaps in our understanding, the biases in our thinking, the flaws in our systems, to approach our problems with a spirit of curiosity and compassion, seeking to understand before we act. Perhaps he would encourage us to look beyond the surface of things to the deeper patterns and principles that connect them, to see our challenges not in isolation, but as part of a larger web of cause and effect, action and consequence. Perhaps he would remind us that true wisdom is not just about what we know, but about what we do with what we know. That knowledge without ethics, power without responsibility, is a recipe for disaster. And perhaps most of all, he would urge us to keep asking the big questions, the ones that have animated human inquiry since the dawn of civilization. Questions about the nature of reality, the purpose of existence, the sources of good and evil, the path to a life well lived. For in the end, is that not what Solomon's legacy really teaches us? That the pursuit of wisdom, the quest for understanding, is not just an intellectual exercise but a spiritual imperative, that in illuminating the mysteries of the universe, we are also playing with the mysteries of our own souls. And that, whether we are kings or commoners, scientists or mystics, ancients or moderns, we are all in our own way seekers of truth, each tracing our own circles of meaning in the vast oneness that so many eternal minds have thought about. Let us walk into the future with the courage and curiosity of those old magicians, but also with the humility and compassion of the wise. Let us use our power, our knowledge, our technologies, not just for our own gain, but for the greater good of all. Let us remember that in the end we are all connected, to each other, to the planet, to the great web of life and consciousness that spans the ages. And let us act accordingly, with reverence and responsibility, with wonder and with love. For that perhaps is the greatest magic of all, the alchemy of turning knowledge into wisdom, power into compassion, self-interest into service. It is a magic we must all learn to wield if we are to create a world worthy of our highest aspirations. So let us study the keys of Solomon, but let us also unlock the wisdom in our own hearts. Let us conjure the spirits of our better nature and banish the demons of our baser instincts. Let us draw our circles with care and intention and fill them with the light of understanding. And let us never forget that in the end, the true measure of our magic, the true test of our wisdom, will lie not in the mysteries we seek or the powers we attain, but in the lives we touch, the worlds we create, the legacy we leave. That is the great work that awaits us. That is the ultimate transmutation of all. That is God's plan. May we rise to meet it,